Yeah, we flew down. It was a 3-day wine and food festival. So it was a great gig, really, because we got fed this gourmet food for 3 days. Like, I've never eaten so well.
Wow.
So, and it was all organic and
The perks.
Oh yeah, it was amazing actually. So Justine loved it too, and there was a lot of wineries around as well. So it was on the hit list was to go to one of the wineries while we were there.
So your wife came along on the
No,
trip?
it's just me and Justine. Yeah, purely professional.
You thought about specialising in wine and cheese tasting events, you know?
Yeah,
maybe that's a thing.
Maybe I can see why. Maybe we'll have to look into that, because that was amazing food that festival. But yeah, the event itself, there was no real big cases. There's a few minor things that happened, a few asthma attacks, and a few people that had taken things for the first time and were a bit excited by what had happened to their body, but nothing all that much sort of happened for that 3 days. We were packing up on the last day, and a vehicle that had left came speeding back into us. They'd already left the facility and were coming back in. So it was in paddocks. It was like they're all in tents, and so it was an all outdoor sort of event. And then they had really like a shed with lots of music and stuff that they'd played as beatboxing music, like thump 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 the whole 3 days. So this car came back. It had a smashed rear window and came up to us where we're already sort of packed up our tent and putting all the medical supplies and everything in the truck, and said, "You've got to come quick. Come now. My mate's been hit by a rock." So I had a look at Justine. I said, "What do you reckon we should do here?" And we went and asked the organizer, "Can we go?" I would prefer if we both went. So I asked if we could both go. Yeah, it was offsite. It was a block and a half away. And the organizer, I thought that would have been a really good learning opportunity for Justine. So anyway, we went to the organizer, and he didn't allow us to both go. So we had to make the decision about who would go. So the decision was made that I went, just because I didn't know what it was. So anyway, I went down, I took the truck with me. I hopped out of the car. It was a suburban sort of road. There was all paddocks and things around us, so there's no houses around. I hopped out of the vehicle. There's gunshots going off on the right-hand side.
Wow.
Yeah. So it sounded like a 22, but they're going off, and it sounded very close. So they're going off. I've come around the ambulance.
A gun is a gun to me.
What happened to a rock? What happened to the rocks?
Yeah,
we didn't deal with that.
Yeah. So they're behind. So I hopped out. I've parked on the left-hand side, hopped out and gone around, heard the gunshots, and then I'm staying behind the vehicle for protection. They were about 10 metres away behind a big tree. And I've said, sure that was a rock. Sure that's not a gunshot wound. And then they've brought the casualty over, and he had an entry wound, or only a small wound up here in his arm, like in his humeral sort of region, and he was very pale. So he's laying down now, and at the time, the people there were very on edge. There was 3 other people there, and they were really worried. And I said, "Has the police been called yet, or an ambulance?" And they hadn't called anyone. So so I'm on the phone to call.
Do you know why they didn't call anyone? Or were they?
Because they've panicked. Yeah. So I actually had, at that time, I had one of them come up to me while I was on the phone to the ambulance and ask, "Can I smoke a joint?" That's what he asked me whilst.
He asked you for it?
He asked for permission during that actual time. So anyway, I was like, "You do what you need to do."
I thought maybe he thought there was some stuff in the ambulance.
But that resembled quite, I was quite interested that's how that person took on that moment.
Exactly.
That moment, it was too much, essentially. That's what I took out of that.
Yeah.
It was nothing, no reflection on that person at all. It was just at that moment, this is way too much going on.
That fight, flight, freeze kind of, some people.
That type of thing.
Just react
or
differently,
smoke.
don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So anyway, I was on the phone to the ambulance, and they won't send an ambulance when so I told them there's active gunshots going off. they said that, no, we're not allowed to, we won't be sending an ambulance. So they send police to make sure the scene's safe, which is the usual sort of, it's usually how it's run. So police came, and the police were there for like about a minute, and these gunshots kept going off, and they sounded like they might have been getting closer. So the police officer said, we've got to get out of here. So I threw him the keys and said, all right, well, you drive. And we all hopped in the back, and he hightailed out of there a few blocks, and then we met up with an ambulance service and handed over. And then that person was actually, he did have, that person did get the bullet stuck in their lung, so they got flown to a metropolitan hospital to be managed. They're okay now. And yeah, it was just, the whole site then went into lockdown. And then I've switched from that particular job of needing to manage that person back to now trying to get to the airport, and they put the whole place in lockdown. So we had our flights to get back to the coast, and we had things we had on the next day, other things that I needed to get to as well. And so then it was another issue. How do I get into a lockdown area where my student is so we get to the airport? So, and luckily managed to do that. Won't go into details on how that was managed, but where there's a will, there's a way. And that was managed to happen. And then, yeah, we just literally, we made the airport with like 5 seconds to spare, probably. So
my goodness, 3 days of whining and dining, and then you get
the action. It was all for that.
All the action in one moment as you're packing up.
So you never know what's going to happen at events, and that's what I tell all of the students that come through is complacency. Don't get complacent. Be prepared for anything that might happen. And in my experience, it always is the last casualty of the day. It just always seems to happen that way.